So for this exercise, I want you to create an illustrative landscape. Here are a variety of different landscapes that were likely created in Illustrator. Drawing simple shapes using the pen tool, making shapes look three-dimensional. So just kind of breaking down the landscape and building it from the back forward would be your first step to creating a landscape like this. So what I'd like you to do is you're going to create this simple landscape here. So looking at this landscape, we've got a sky and clouds. Then we have the sun, and then we have this hill, and then we've got the path and the trees, and then we have another hill, and then we have the path in front. So thinking how this drawing is kind of layered, you could kind of build it from the back forward. So what we're going to do is we're going to start an Illustrator document, new document. Let's just make it 5 by 7. So the width 7, the height 5. And keep in mind that you are going to get credit for completing this illustration. It's kind of the final check to make sure you understand how to use the pen tool. So we're going to start with the sky first. And the sky has a slight gradient from light blue to even lighter blue. So let's go ahead and talk about gradients and how we can do that. Under Window, let's view Gradient Palette, and you can just fill it, and then you can change the color. So by double-clicking on the palette, let's just start with a blue. If we want to change that blue, we can make a new swatch. New swatch. You make it really light blue, and then maybe we can have the other end be white. So what we'll do is I'm going to just drag this down, and then I'm going to go back to my my gradient palette, show options, select my object, and over on the left here there's a tool that looks like a square gradient. That's the tool for you to tell what direction you want the gradient to go. So if I have white on one end and blue on the other, I'm going to click my new swatch I made. Oops. I'm going to drag it up to my gradient tool, and I'm going to drag this one out. So I have this real light pale blue. And notice the gradient's going from left to right. So I've got this gradient tool that I can drag up, down, sideways to create a gradient. And this is a great tool to make an object look three-dimensional if you wanted to do some shading. So I'm going to kind of stretch this a bit, maybe go a little bit further so the white is, oops, it's kind of off the page. And then we've got our background. The next thing we're going to do is let's create some clouds. Your clouds might look different than the clouds that are in the picture, and that's totally fine. So you're just going to start by taking your pen tool and creating some clouds. Click, hold, and drag to create a new curve. Click, hold, and drag to create a new curve. Notice that I'm clicking on the anchor point to end that curve. And I can hit enter or just click on another tool to deselect that. I want to take the white or the black outline off, and I want it to be a white cloud. Okay, maybe your cloud looks more like kind of a long wispy cloud. Click, hold, and drag to create a new curve, and always close your shape. And notice that when I close my shape, there's a little circle that pops up right next to the pen tool that's telling you that shape is closed. Okay, so we've got these two clouds, and you can change them, you can duplicate them, you can overlap them, you can rotate them, you can reflect them, object, transform, reflect, 90 degrees, so you can reflect them. So play around with what you want your sky to look like. The next step would be to create this sun. So the sun is two-part. It's a circle, and then it's the little points. So I could start with a circle. Hold the shift key to make a perfect circle. And now your sun might look very different. And I encourage you to reach out to other resources. Let me just show you how a sun could look different. A sun could look like this. This is almost like a sun setting. A sun could look like this. It doesn't have to have the points on it. A sun could look like it's got rays coming out. Let me see if I can find one. Let's see here. Here we go. A sun could look like it's got rays coming out. And there are quick and easy ways to create that effect. You would need to go Google it. Here's another example. You would need to Google a tutorial on how to create sun rays coming out from the sun. So you can make your sun look any way you want. Okay, so right now I'm going to just show you how to create one that looks, something like that. So starting with a circle, and then I'm going to make another circle because one of them is going to have the points on it. This one I'm going to fill with orange, and I want to do a gradient, and maybe I want to do a radial gradient, and I want to take this red out of my gradient, and maybe this yellow, and maybe less orange. So I'm going to pull this little thing so I see more of the yellow. Maybe I want to adjust that. So there we go. Kind of got the color I want. I'm going to bring, right now it's behind the circle, so I'm going to arrange, bring it to the front. Okay. And then this one might want like a shade darker. And how do I make the points? Well, there's probably 20 different ways I could do that. One way would be to just add anchor points right on that line. So I'm just doing maybe 3 different anchor points between each segment, between each anchor point, the bottom and each side. So now I have all these anchor points, and I could just go to an effect and apply an effect. So let's try distort, pucker, and bloat. Preview. I can pull this. Bloating is going to make it go out. Pucker is going to make it kind of go in. And what it did was it pulled in that shape from each anchor point that I created. Now doing it this way, you can see that it's not super even. The anchor points weren't evenly spaced all the way around. There's probably an easier way to do that so that it is perfect. I'm going to leave that up to you to figure out. So we've got our sun. Let's group these together. Hold the shift key, Command G to group. Probably going to need to make that a little smaller. Okay, and then looking at our landscape, the next thing to do is to create the hill in the background. So what you're going to do is draw that hill. It kind of scoops down, and then it scoops back up. So we'll kind of come back up here. So I'm using my pen tool to draw that shape. I've got a full shape created. I can go back in and adjust. So my white arrow, I can change, move, do anything I need to do to make it look make it look right. So I like the way that looks, but it's obviously the wrong color. So again, I would play around with the gradients. And if you take a look, it goes from kind of a Kelly green to a lime green. So I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to take it off radial. I wanted a linear. Use my gradient tool to tell it how to gradate. Don't want to see that harsh line, so I'm going to try to make it look as smooth as possible. Maybe pull this down so we got more of that, oops, gradient slider, so more of the lime green is showing. That's a nice transition. The next step would be to create the road. So draw this shape with the black tool. I'm not going to go through each of those, but you kind of get the idea now. But when it comes to the next hill, let's just copy and paste it, and let's reflect it. So now we've got another hill. And notice that the hill also has the same gradient, so it separates from the hill behind it. So I'm going to kind of play around with that to make that look a little bit more obvious. Okay. You can also play around with the gradient on this one. So you have light against dark, dark against light. So you can see that contrast, right? When you're making the trees, let's move the sun down. When you're making the trees, a quick and easy way, let's see, let's just draw a triangle. Holding the shift key, making 45-degree angles. Actually, you know, there's lots of ways you could go about making a triangle. I could go with a rectangle and just get rid of one of the anchor points. Clip. Delete anchor point. We have a triangle there. You know, there's different ways to do that. There is a way to curve edges, and I don't know why it's not giving me this option to curve an edge. So let me just show you what I mean. When I make a shape, usually a little white dot will show up here. You can pull those curves in. Must be a setting in here. But anyway, you could create your tree using that, because if you look at the tree, it's got little kind of curved triangles with gradients on them. You know, maybe if I pull this down here so I can see it, a copy. That one's smaller. Copy. Smaller, and then we have a pretty cute little tree there. Changing the color of it, certainly, because you want it to stand out. Maybe it's more of a dark green to a light green. Take my eyedropper to make sure that one's the same. So there we've got a little tree. Command G to group that one. You know, and then you can play around with copy, paste, maybe make this tree a little bigger. Maybe they can overlap. You know, they're going to look bigger if they're closer to you. So this one is going to look like it's closer. This one's going to look farther away because it's smaller. And then let's bring this object arrange, bring to front to make sure that's happening. Maybe quite a bit bigger. So there's a little grouping of trees. And again, your trees might look different. Everyone's landscape is going to look like cousins of each other. So once you get the roads drawn in, you've completed your first little landscape illustration. So I'd like to see this final sketch that you've created. So make sure that you show me when you're all finished.